have Sophia Diapegrum. She's a Fulbright National Geographic Society Fellow.
Wow.
And we have Peter Smith. And in introducing Mr. Smith, I will read the following, and Mr. Smith will explain it himself. Gaffer, reading Gaffer, Best Boy Electric.
Sometimes you go and shoot on location, and then you recreate the same location in a studio. What would be the reason to do that?
So sometimes when we go on location, we're going to shoot on location for the big, what we call wide shots, okay? Not the detail shots. And it's because sometimes, if it's say it's a street, we're shooting on a street, and the street is 2 blocks long, it's very, very hard to find, to build 2 blocks worth of a street. So what we'll do is we'll go to a location, we will light the location, and we will do the big wide shots. We'll also do the shots where there's maybe some big stunts. And then what we'll do is we'll recreate a small portion of that location to do the detail work. And we'll show you some examples of that.
Yeah. Thank you. So Peter is actually my brother-in-law, and I also work in the film business, but I do documentaries. And so when he talks about having hundreds of people, for me, it's just me and a camera, and I'm lucky if I have one light. So we can also talk about how to use light if you don't have light, but how to think about light, how to use light to tell your stories. Even if you have nothing, you have natural light, and how to use that to tell the stories, to create a certain feeling about your characters. Those of you who are photographers here, we're going to set up a demonstration of a basic 3-light setup, and how just 3 lights can really change, if you're interviewing somebody or talking to somebody, the very different feelings that you can get from using 3 lights in different ways. So, does anyone want to volunteer to come and sit?
Yeah.
We can
Who would like to be a volunteer? Who would like to be a model?
Кім модель болсы келді? Кел.
We can do one of, we'll use this, we need a chair though.
Huh?
Sorry, we're going to need a chair for our...
Бір орындық керек. Орындық беріңіздер. Бір орындық.
Right. So do you want to talk about the 3 kind of, like,
Right.
yeah, 3, let's talk about, how much experience do you all have? Has anyone done lighting setups before? Some people here? Anyone else?
Basic
Okay.
lighting.
So actually maybe talk about the different kinds of light that we have. We'll talk about hard light, soft light, and then you can have a seat and we'll work around, yeah.
So in our world, we basically very broadly classify lights as a hard light. And a hard light is a light that is going to give you a shadow. This, if anybody's doing any lighting, this is your most important tool. Your hand and a fist, okay? Because you can see, what you can see is you can see a top light.
This is you to represent the face, really.
Represent the face. You can see that you have a key side, and you see you can have a fill side.
Can you explain what key side means?
So what we want to do is we want to give some shape to the face, okay? Because if we just light it flat, then some of the character of that character is diminished. And so in a lot of cases, what we want to do is we want to have a key light, which would be a primary direction the light comes from, and it's usually motivated by something. The light doesn't, and what we try and do is we try and make the light as what we call a motivated source, okay? And so what it can be is a table lamp. We call table lamps in the film industry practicals. It's a practical light, whereas these would be like movie lights. But if we were to set a practical light, a table lamp, and that would be the motivation for the rest for our artificial lighting that we're going to do behind the scenes. Okay, so we want to have the best lighting is lighting that you never realize has been lit, right? is natural, and you can just follow along with characters and you can see what they're doing. And so that's what we try and recreate, is motivated natural lighting. Okay, and so again, we have our two kinds of light. So we have a hard light, and a hard light is going to leave you with a shadow, and or a hard shadow, and a soft light is going to leave you with a very soft shadow. So this light here is fairly soft, and if we were to do this, you see, all it does is just you kind of reduce the intensity of the light, but you're not seeing a hard shadow. This is a fairly hard light, okay? And you see how it's got a harder shadow? Yeah. And so that's what we try and do, is that we try, most beauty lighting, we try and do with a soft light. And there's many ways of getting soft lights, okay?
Can I add something to that? You might not want to be doing beauty lighting. This is another thing that we should talk about. If you're trying to express something about the situation for the character, this, for example, the overhead lights, is very, very, what we would call very soft beauty lighting. You see, she has shadows on her face, but the shadows are soft but modeled, and so but you see the texture of her face, you see the depth of character on her face. You may want to light something that's motivated by light that is very harsh, that has hard shadows, but it may be expressing something about the character's situation. So these are all choices that are being made. It's not random. Anytime you see anything that's lit, there's not a randomness to it. And so very specific choices are being made about what kind of light and whether it's soft or hard. Yes.
Yeah. So in this case, and what we usually try and do is try and light the key light on what we call the look side, the side that she's looking. And to this, so she's looking to the right, and so we would normally want to, I said normally, because there's situations vary, but in a lot of cases, we want to light from the look side. And that's, so this is our key light here. And sometimes what you can do is you can actually, with one light, you can actually get this, and you can also get a little bit of this fill here with one light, depending on how you bring it around. There are cases where you have two lights. So you'd have a key light, because maybe you want to come around quite a bit, and then you may have a secondary light, which is a fill light, okay? But again, in some cases, in this case, we want to have a good, nice wrap, but in some cases you don't, and it changes by the situation.
So can you explain, what's the difference between a key light and a fill light then?
A key light is going to be, in most cases, it's going to be the stronger, more intense light, and the fill light is going to be able to just give you a little more definition to the rest of when I say the rest of the face, another portion of the face that you may want to reveal.
So let's have a look here. Like so this would be considered key.
This would be a key light.
And maybe she's looking off this way, so that would be the natural.
And so now
and the camera would be here.
Right. And so
now
you
can even look towards me a little bit more. There we go. So for you, those of you behind, there's light hitting her from this side, but she has subtle shading here. And so a fill light may be positioned on the other side.
Right.
It might be a reflection. You can use a source.
And to a certain extent,
she has some fill.
This has some fill already. And in a lot of cases, like in this case, the key light and the fill light, they're the same color temperature. One of the things that we deal with quite a bit is color temperature. Okay. And in this case, we have this is 3200. This is 3200. But these overhead lights and the outside bulb is 5600.
Who knows what color temperature is? Anybody?
270.
Pardon?
270.
Pardon?
270, same kind.
Well, yes. What we're dealing with is color temperature comes from our basic natural world. Our basic very first light that we ever had was fire. Well, actually, the second light. The very first artificial light we had was firelight. Okay, and that's where we get this warm light, that's a natural light to us. We are comforted by it, and it looks natural to us. It doesn't look unnatural. The second natural light is daylight, okay? And if anybody remembers their chemistry of Kelvin, degrees Kelvin, when you burn things. So at 3,200 degrees Kelvin is basically what a tungsten light will emit as far as a color temperature. The outside world, for the most part, it varies, but it's 5,600 degrees Kelvin, okay?
When the sun's at its zenith, would you say?
Yes, and it's also direct sunlight. What actually happens, again, if anybody's dealing in the real world, it's actually almost 7,000 degrees Kelvin, because of the scattering in the atmosphere and the clouds and everything else. Okay.
So you're feeling one is warm. That's a very simple way of
Yep.
looking at it. One is warmer light, and the other one is much bluer, cooler light.
And what we call cooler light.
So sometimes we're trying to match these in a scene. We're seeing a lot more in movies now where people are not trying to match. We had to match more for film using actual celluloid film, because when we were developing the film, it was much harder to process if you had two different color temperatures going on. With digital now, we can mix these color temperatures much more easily, and in fact I think it's quite creative. But a lot of times you'll be asked to match. So that means that if you're using some daylight in your shots, you're going to be asked to match if you want to use some fill or whatever. So actually, is there a daylight match?
Yeah, so this is right now. So this is now 5,600.
The blue module.
Yeah, we can do that down quite a bit.
And on many of these lights now, you either originally had to use lights that were just one thing. So they would be daylight light or... But now you have much more, with the LED lights, you have a lot more control over dialing in the exact temperature that we call it temperature that you want.
Right. And then, again, with film, and when we only had, before we had the plethora of LED lights where we could have almost any color and any color temperature, we only really had two kinds of lights. We would have what we call a tungsten light, which is 3,200, or we would have HMIs, which were 5,600, okay?
And so how would you adjust those lights for subtleties? What did you do to them?
So it depended on what we were doing. If we were inside and we had tungsten lights, but we had a source from the outside coming in, which would be 5,600, what we would do, if we didn't want to have the two different colors, what we would do is we would put a gel on the tungsten light, which would now balance the color temperature to the outside. All of our what we call cine gels, they were all for balancing purposes. If we had a source which we couldn't control, or if we had multiple sources of one kind of light, and we had one source of a different kind of light, we wanted to be able to match these things. So we would use gels, and the gels were also defined.
They come on sheets. They're big rolls.
Yeah, the big rolls of like colored cellophane, and we use less and less of that.
Yeah, those companies are not happy.
Yeah,
so
the gel companies are not happy.
What kind of color temperature was this lit to?
So this was lit to 3,200. However, because of so let's actually go to the wide.
Okay.
Yeah.
And should we finish doing our little setup? Oh, we're going to do this
There we
one.
go. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the wide of that close up. Okay. So what we were doing is this is a location. So this is a ballroom in Atlanta at the Fox Theater. Okay, even though we have turned it into the United Nations conference. Okay, so these up.
Which movie is this, Pete?
This is Black Panther.
Have you seen Black Panther?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So you know what.
So this, and this are all fairly big windows, and because of because we have to push in so far, we have to use very big lights. And one thing, we've got two things going on here, is that we want to have, see how you can see some patterns on the ground, and you can see the hard shadows. We needed to maintain those, but what we did is we had to put gel on the lights so that we can make them 3200 because.
So where are you said lights, but you would say you've got
The lights are outside this window, outside this window, outside this window, outside this window, this window, and this window.
So that's not daylight.
That's no.
Right.
As a matter of fact, we worked very hard to stop the daylight from coming in. And the reason being is that since the sun moves, and we're shooting this, we started shooting this at, say, 7 o'clock in the morning, and we say we got done about 10 o'clock at night. So we were going to count on having the same lighting setup from the sun. We would never be able to have that because the sun's going to move in an arc. So what we do, the way I describe it is we're control freaks. We need to control everything, okay? And so what we did is that behind those lights, there's a big covering that stops the daylight from coming in. So we use the windows so that we can actually see them. And then we put a little bit of gel on the windows to soften the light, but not so much that we couldn't keep some shadows. We wanted to have some shadows. We wanted to have some definition. We wanted to show the grandeur of the place, and also the hard light does a couple things. You see how it naturally puts a glare, which are these sparkles. It naturally puts a sparkle on this stuff, and so that we don't have to light everything individually.
So the other lights in there, what else do you have? You have practicals?
So we have, this is what we call practicals, which are these here. Those are practicals.
Are they actually producing any light that affects the scene, or is it
They
just...
do not. They are nothing more than what we call eye candy.
Eye candy.
It just gives you something to look at in the background. It helps define the space.
Mm-hmm. And what else, actually I'll ask you, what else do you think is in this room? Along with the lighting, yes, obviously the actors and the furniture, but what else has been put into this room, do you think, to give it atmosphere? Fog. Yes, somebody over here got, well done.
Exactly.
Why do you think that we use fog or smoke? What does it do?
It makes them see the light ending. Yeah, and it makes light softer.
It can, but it also shows some directionality of the light.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're going to use atmosphere, one of the things you have to realize is that atmosphere only works from about 45 degrees to a backlight. If you have atmosphere on a side light, you'll never see the direction of the light. So it needs to be about 45 degrees from your source.
So, okay, so show us, if I'm the camera and you're the light,
I'm the light. So
this isn't going to work.
This will work just fine because you can see the shadow. If we start coming over here, then the fog becomes ineffective.
So I won't see a shot.
What do you think we've done in this particular set? And the key word is everything. Okay, so every single light that you see, we have. There's no accident in any of this. Okay, so we put those lights above the stage. And you notice up here how there's a little bit of light?
Yeah.
Well, what's happening up here is way up here, we've got a big balloon.
Yeah.
Okay? And we'll use a balloon to do the ambient lighting. Okay? And and that allows, you see how some of this light goes all the way across, but you still have light here, and it's soft, and you give light to the room. So we also need to increase the ambience as well.
So that's a big balloon with a light in it. It's usually got helium in it.
May I ask something? Do we need any subjects in background?
Yeah.
No.
Maybe we need some backlight.
Oh, we have backlight right here. Let's be a little bit careful about clotheslining this. So we're going to do one of two things. We can just bring this, a backlight and just be a backlight. Instead of that, because you could use it as an edge as well. But as you notice in here, we don't really have an edge. Okay.
Can you explain what the edge, what you were just saying about edge?
Now, something to think about
Where's the camera?
is you as a gaffer, you should be in front of, you should be lighting from the front, and you should ask one of your electricians to move the light.
Okay.
So if you're a camera here, what's the major problem?
I have to feel the shadow side. Maybe.
Well, but where's your light?
My light is key
Yeah,
light
no,
is
but-
here.
but-
Backlight.
We're looking right at a light, so
Yeah.
yeah.
So we need to raise it up. However, there's no knuckles on it.
I have to read
Oh,
it.
there's no
Maybe
knuckles?
so.
No
Okay.
knuckles, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So normally that would be obviously raised out
Right.
of but what is this light doing back here? Anybody?
So we defer the main character out of the background.
Correct?
So it's picking up light on the back of her hair, a little bit of edge on her shoulders, so that she's separating. She doesn't actually have really, in this shot, there's not really an edge, but there's enough difference between her dark hair and helm, crown and the back that she separates. If it was a much darker background,
So we have to separate it like shadow and left, so that will defer the main character out of lighter background.
yeah.
Mhm.
And what about where the lights are in this? Can you see, if you look at the shadows, what kind of position is the key light?
45
The
degrees
left
maybe.
side, above.
It's, yes,
Above
it's on this
Right
side,
Right
but it's obviously coming,
It's coming from the
coming
top,
down.
right?
Yeah.
yeah.
I can put.
Now, one thing.
Чуть-чуть aldı alsanız.
What was it you said about where the gap is looking for? Because I think that was interesting.
So you should have somebody come and do this for you. Okay?
Like me.
So the gaffer is giving instructions, right,
Right.
over the radio
Mhm.
or
On the radio?
on the radio, and he's telling his team. Well, he's looking from the point of view
Of
of
the
where
camera.
the camera's
Of
going
the
to be.
cameras.
So he needs to keep that view, and then can give instructions to his team about how much to adjust.
Right. So you have the lights roughly in position, but what's the one thing that maybe you could change?
Maybe reflectors.
Maybe I have to feel
Maybe just the intensity.
intensity.
Well, I bring it down maybe a little bit. Like in yeah. There you go.
And now I'm the director. I'm like, why is this taking so long? Okay. No, that would be the producer.
exactly.
Right, we got to go.
Yeah.
You have to remember that pressure.
Right.
See, talk about the pressure.
Yeah. So what we would have is we'd actually have, and we would never have her. We would never light her. We'd have a stand-in. So a stand-in will come in and we'll light the stand-in, and then we'll do what we call minor little tweaks when the real actor comes in. But the most minor tweaks, because they're in there to act, to say their lines and to act, and they're not lighting models. So I think we've done pretty good. Now one of the things that we've done is that, as you can see, she's fairly lit.
Okay.
See how she's fairly lit all the way down? Which is kind of what we've emulated here. Okay. But in some cases, what we would do is that we would. Do you guys have any flags?
No.
Okay.
We can use. Let's
Oh,
say
you can use this.
someone's here.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah, you could use this as a fake flag.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. So what you could do is that So then you could shape not so much, but just a little bit, and so you could shape the light so that, again, we want to make this a motivated source. We don't want to make it, I'm lit, and I'm kind of. We don't want to say that, I've done my job, and everybody, we want to make this a little more natural.
So okay. So there's putting light in, and then there's taking light away.
Mhm.
So let's talk about that,
Right.
because that's an important.
Could you airdrop this final shot when it's fine?
Yeah.
And to show for everybody?
Definitely,
Yes.
definitely, yeah.
That would be.
So in a lot of cases, we especially if we're shooting, especially if we're shooting day exteriors where there is a lot of light everywhere. In a lot of cases, we actually want to take away light, and it's what we call negative fill. Okay, and so we can do that. Yeah. Do we have anything black?
Somebody's jacket.
There we go.
Even. Yeah.
So we can just drape that on this. Okay. And so what you can do is you can bring in some. How's effective is that?
Not really.
Not really.
But
You can
the
bring
idea
in-
is there.
Yeah, you can bring in some negative. If we had a little extraneous light. Here we go. So you
Yeah.
see how there's a little bit of extra light here, there. So then we can just bring this up, and now we've kind of completed everything. Okay. All right. And so we call this negative fill because we're taking away light.
Unnecessary lights.
Exactly. And in some cases there'll be a lot of
And
old.
it's not just about blocking light, though. It's actually going to absorb what would normally be
Yeah.
reflecting
Right.
around. It's
Right.
going to
Ah,
absorb
yes.
some of
Yeah.
that side as
Yeah.
well.
This
Yeah.
really seen when you make photos or filming some reflecting thing like maybe glass bottles or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Because remember, you may not have lights in every case, and so you may have natural light. So then you would use, maybe the light is very hard, and then you could use, if you had a silk like this, you can use this to soften it, and then you can use another a negative fill to help shape the light if you don't have any lights at all.
Yeah, so for example, if we only had the sunlight, we would say that's then the key side that would be coming in through there. We can then use this as a little bit of fill on this side from that source. And then we may have to forego a background. Or we can either take another reflector back there, and if you can angle it, find some of the sunlight and kind of send it up that. You can see there's
Yes.
if we were having sunlight this way, then you can send it up. And so even if you don't have a light source and you only have natural light, with two other things, I mean, I've used everything from a table that I've turned on, like there's a white table there. I've used that as a fill. Sometimes with foil on it even, it depends what you can find. And then even sometimes a piece of white paper
Right.
or a piece of cardboard
Right.
is enough to, but if you have those three ways of shaping light, you're going to be able to create a very nicely modeled, expressive face.
Right.
Now, let's say in beauty lighting, what's the other way that we see light used that's full and flat? That if somebody wants to look ageless,
Or ageless, yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
I'd be a good example of that. You might want to use, because also I've got quite a big nose, and I may not want that shadow across my face. It might not be flattering.
Right.
So then you start to bring light
Start bringing
away from the sides and more to the front. And you'll see this a lot more in sitcom and
Right.
some TV shows
Right.
are using much flatter light from
Right.
the front. It's fast.
Well, exactly, and that's one of the reasons why we would use what we call like a flat light, because it's fast. This type of lighting, as you can see, it takes a little bit of time to set it up. And also we're setting it up for this position here.
As soon as we move
As
the
soon as we
camera-
move the camera or she moves, what we may have to do is if she moves someplace else, we would set up another lighting setup for this position. And maybe if they go around back to that corner, another lighting setup for that. Now, sometimes we'll do it if it's all one shot, then that means that we need to put some lights here, so put some lights there. Now, if you do it what we call flat and full, because everything is just full, then they can kind of move anywhere they want.
But it's not as expressive.
But it's not as expressive, it's not as flattering. So there's always a compromise. There's no one way to do any of this stuff, okay? And there are some actors, some, like I said, older actors, that they insist on having it flat and full. And so what we try and do is a little bit in post-production is try and put a little bit of shape in the post-production with contrast.
And that goes for women and men.
Yes, absolutely.
And one of the other issues we were talking about the other day is using the edge or this backlight on men who have very thin hair here. They don't want that.
Right.
They don't want you showing up. You know, so all of these things have to be taken into consideration. Yeah. You were also young and easy to like, but
yes,
it's not always the case. So,
It's I was working on a sitcom, and we would have, and in sitcoms, because everybody needs to move around very quickly, and the cameras need to move quickly, all the lights you're going to use are already set. It's just a matter of turning that one on, that one on, that one on, that one on. And we had an actor who was a tall, bald man, and he didn't want his bald head showing up as a reflection. And so we would have a cue whenever he was on set that the backlights that we would use for other people would never, ever come on. And he would know which ones they were. And he goes,
actors are very conscious of their of what lights are.
Yeah.
Most of them have they're very clued into what works for them and what doesn't. So
we
can't mess around.
We have some older actresses that what they will do is they will sit there and they will have a mirror. And they will go, okay, well, that one works and that one works. Yeah, that one works. I think that one's too much. And you know, and
you should go with that.
Where is my mirror? Where's the mirror? You look. So let's make something a bit more dramatic from this, perhaps.
Okay.
Something more moody. This is very beautiful, but maybe we'll switch out with someone else. Let's have a guy be our model this time.
Okay.
Somebody else want to sit in? Sure. Great. Now, we have another factor coming in here with glasses.
With glasses.
Yeah.
Okay. No.
Let's leave them
So you have to work with glasses. Okay. So what would from this setup, what would make this a little more dramatic?
You can put it on the side,
Right light.
maybe.
There you go. There you go. It also depends on which way he's looking. So you may also change the direction how it's looking.
Maybe for more dramatic, we can use harder light.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that we make harder shadows.
So actually, one of the things. One of the other things that we're always looking at is where people are going to be looking to. We talked about that. Her view is actually, it's hard to tell. But she's kind of, and she's very in the center of that frame, but she's more or less, because of the way her head is turned, what we would say is looking into that, into the space on the right of the frame here. And the other thing that you may need to light for is a little bit of sparkle in people's eyes, because people can very quickly just look very unnatural and dead unless you see a little ping in their eyes. And that's sometimes something that can be added very small on camera or on near the camera, or it can be a source that's quite a long way away as well. But it brings life into the face and is another consideration. So where your actor is looking or where your subject is looking is something very, we decide on that as well while we're looking at you. Are you going to be looking just this way or just that way? Makes a huge difference in exactly where these lights are going to be positioned. So this is looking very dramatic.
Right.
But how do you feel about this?
Maybe you can make it more than that.
So you've got light from one side.
Yeah.
So now, I don't know if you can see behind, but most of his face here is almost completely in shadow. There's no even light on his cheeks or along the side here, so it's very much... So we're seeing every emphasis in the shape of his face.
Now, and then one thing we can do is you can turn So let's tilt that up a little bit. No, let's
No.
tilt it up.
Tilt it, yeah,
Tilt it up, okay.
Ah.
And let's bring it around a little bit, if you can.
if there is room.
All right. Now see how this is what we call an edge. And
So now we're seeing a little bit of light expressing on the top of his eyebrow here and his cheek, and a little bit along his jawline. So it's still very dramatic, but it's giving a little bit more definition to his face.
And one of the reasons we would use this as an edge is that if they're looking in two different directions, maybe, and this is again reading into things, if this is a bad guy over here, and you look this way, then
he's looking into
he's looking
the
at the
shadow
bad
side.
guy, and you have a good guy over here, and you look this way, and then so you can actually motivate the feeling just with the lighting, okay? And a lot of cases, what we'll do is we'll also just use a top light only, and so then
I wonder if you actually move your chair a little closer here, we'll see what effect that.
and if you were to just spin that around.
45 degrees.